In a world addicted to noise, the woman who does not chase attention becomes the one people quietly admire the most. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Her presence speaks louder than arguments. Her silence does not ask for validation. It gives others the space to reflect, to notice, and to return to their own center. This is not about playing games or using silence as punishment. It is about becoming a woman so in tune with herself that silence becomes her sanctuary and her greatest statement. You see, the silent woman is often misunderstood. But she is not silent because she lacks words. She is silent because she has learned their value. There is a kind of quiet that is not born of fear or insecurity, but of strength, deep, composed, and rooted in self-awareness. A woman who learns to win without words is not someone who is withholding or disengaged. Rather, she is someone who has understood the immense power of presence, the profound energy that rests in silence. In a world obsessed with being heard, she chooses to understand first. In a world racing to speak, she chooses to feel. There is an old Eastern teaching that says, "Still waters run deep." The river that moves the slowest often carries the most force beneath its surface. This is the nature of true silence. It is not the absence of sound. It is the fullness of inner alignment. A woman who walks this path discovers that silence is not weakness. It is mastery over reaction. And in the realm of relationships, this kind of mastery becomes a sanctuary for herself and a mirror for others. When we feel triggered, the immediate human impulse is to react, to respond, to justify. Neuroscience teaches us that this impulse comes from the amygdala, the part of our brain responsible for emotional responses, especially those related to fear and threat. But a woman who masters the art of silence learns how to pause. That pause, those few seconds of restraint, allow the signal to travel upward to the prefrontal cortex, where reason lives, where empathy resides, where perspective is found. In that pause, there is no war to fight. There is no battle to win. There is only clarity. Consider the story of Lena, a woman in her mid-50s who had spent years in a difficult marriage marked by constant verbal tension. Every disagreement became a cycle of shouting, defending, and emotional fatigue. One day she made a decision, not to fight, not to argue, not to retreat either, but simply to not respond immediately. She would listen, not with the intention to reply, but to understand. She would allow silence to hold space between stimulus and reaction. At first, her husband mocked her calm. He accused her of being cold. But over time, something shifted. Without the emotional fuel he was used to, the fire of conflict began to die down. What replaced it was surprising curiosity. He began to ask questions, to reflect, to feel the weight of his own words without resistance. This is the quiet influence of a woman who has chosen mastery over reaction. She does not aim to control others. She has simply learned to control herself. Her silence is not a wall. It is a doorway into deeper truth. In relationships, especially romantic ones, many women are conditioned to believe that their value is tied to how much they express, explain, or prove themselves. But wisdom shows us that the more grounded you are in your inner truth, the less external validation you need. A woman who remains composed in the face of misunderstanding does not do so because she agrees. She does so because she understands the futility of proving something to someone who is not ready to receive it. True power is not about dominating others. It is about being so deeply anchored in your own essence that no storm can move you. This is not a power of volume. It is a power of vibration. And so silence becomes your ally, not because it avoids discomfort, but because it transcends it. Think of the moments when someone insulted you, and you responded with a calm gaze, a gentle breath, and no defense. What happened in that space? Did the insult vanish? No, but its power over you disappeared. The moment we stop allowing others to dictate our emotional climate, we begin to win without words. This kind of presence is rare. It's magnetic. People don't always understand it, but they feel it. That's why, in every room, the most silent person often commands the deepest respect, not because of fear, but because others instinctively sense that they are listening, observing, thinking, choosing, not reacting. In psychology, this form of control is known as emotional regulation. It is the ability to manage one's internal states in a healthy and constructive way. It's the opposite of emotional reactivity. And contrary to popular belief, emotional regulation does not mean suppressing your feelings. It means feeling deeply, then responding from a place of clarity rather than compulsion. A woman who regulates her emotions through silence is not disconnected. She is deeply connected to herself. She no longer allows temporary emotions to sabotage permanent relationships. She no longer allows the moods of others to hijack her peace. This is the foundation of self-respect. And from this self-respect emerges a new form of communication, one where your energy, your presence, your boundaries speak more than words ever could. Now imagine the power this brings into your relationships, not just romantic ones, but all connections. Your children begin to mirror your calm. Your coworkers feel safe in your presence. Your partner begins to trust your silence more than the noise of the world. This is not the silence of retreat. It is the silence of a lighthouse, unmoving, unwavering, glowing in stillness. But this stillness is not easily won. It is cultivated. It is chosen. Again and again, in moments of provocation, we must practice it. It may feel unnatural at first, especially for those who were raised to speak quickly, defend often, and always be nice. But real maturity is not about being agreeable. It is about being grounded. Emotional discipline, then, is not something we are born with. It is something we train, like a muscle. Every time you choose to wait before responding, every time you breathe instead of reacting, every time you sit with discomfort rather than escape it, you are building this discipline. And over time, it becomes part of you. You become a sanctuary, not just for others, but for yourself. There's a profound story from the East about a woman named Jiai. She was known in her village for her stillness. People often brought their troubles to her, not because she gave the best advice, but because she knew how to listen without interruption, how to look without judgment, how to be fully present. One day, a man came to her filled with anger. He ranted for hours about betrayal, injustice, and heartbreak. Jiai said nothing. She served him tea. She listened. When he was done, he asked, "Why don't you say anything?" She looked at him and said, "You have spoken so much that you have not yet heard yourself." In that silence, something broke inside him. The armor fell off, tears followed, and healing began, not through words, but through presence. That is the essence of emotional discipline through silence. It is not cold, it is compassionate. It does not ignore emotions. It honors them by giving them the space to breathe without controlling the room. And from that space comes understanding. Many women today are exhausted not because they do too much, but because they feel too much, and they're never given space to process those feelings. Silence, used wisely, is that space. It allows your nervous system to rest. It allows your heart to recalibrate. It allows your mind to filter what's real from what's reaction. In modern science, this space is supported by what is known as vagal tone, the health of your vagus nerve, which controls the rest and digest system of the body. People with high vagal tone can return to calm faster after stress. Meditation, deep breathing, and stillness all improve vagal tone. So when you choose silence, you are not just being spiritual. You are literally rewiring your body for safety, clarity, and strength. Relationships built on reactivity are unstable, but when one person begins to master silence, not the manipulative kind, but the centered kind, everything starts to change. Arguments lose their urgency, words become intentional, conversations go deeper, and above all, you no longer lose yourself in the noise of others. The world will always provoke you. People will test your limits. But your true power lies in how little they can control your inner state. A silent woman is not indifferent. She is invincible because her emotions are not in the hands of others. And so silence becomes your daily practice, not just in moments of conflict, but throughout your day. You pause before replying to a text. You sit in stillness before making a decision. You listen more than you speak. You let silence be your teacher. This kind of woman is not praised loudly, but she is remembered deeply. Her silence is not an absence. It is a presence that changes the temperature of every relationship she enters. A presence that reveals what truly matters. A presence that whispers. Peace is not found in winning arguments. It is found in winning yourself. And when you win yourself, your composure, your clarity, your center, you win without words. There is an invisible strength in a woman who does not feel the need to explain herself constantly, to fill silences with words, or to defend her value through conversation. Her silence is not avoidance, it is presence. And her words, when they do come, are few but full. In a society where voices compete to be the loudest, where so much energy is spent proving, convincing, and reacting, there is something unforgettable about the woman who speaks with intention, not impulse. People hear her differently, not because she says more, but because she says less. And when she does speak, people listen. Human psychology affirms this truth. Research in communication science has shown that individuals who speak deliberately, with measured tone and controlled tempo, are perceived as more competent, trustworthy, and powerful. But the deeper reality is this: when a person chooses to hold their energy in silence, others feel that energy more acutely than if it had been spoken. The mystery of it, the restraint, the clarity, it all adds gravity to her presence. This principle reveals a powerful truth in relationships. When a woman does not rush to fill the silence, her words carry more weight. It is not about playing games or being mysterious. It's about alignment. Her silence says, I am not desperate to be heard. I speak when I have something meaningful to share. I am not moved by urgency. I am anchored in awareness. Take the example of a woman named Mesa, a retired schoolteacher in her 60s. In her earlier years, she believed she needed to keep everyone around her emotionally comfortable by smoothing over conflict with constant reassurance and talking through every disagreement. Over time, she noticed a pattern. Her words were often dismissed or ignored, not because they lacked value, but because they were given too freely. There was no boundary around her speech. She poured herself into people who were not prepared to receive her truth. But something shifted when she began practicing silence. During an argument with her grown daughter, Mesa chose not to interrupt, not to justify, not to raise her voice. She listened, fully, openly, but responded only after taking time to sit with her thoughts. Her reply was brief, calm, and firm, and it changed the entire dynamic. Her daughter, for the first time, truly heard her, not because Mesa raised her voice, but because her energy had changed. Her silence wasn't passive, it was purposeful. This is the effect of presence without noise. When you stop using your voice to seek approval, your voice becomes a vessel of truth, and your truth becomes undeniable. There's a quote that says, "The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear." But the inverse is also true. The quieter you become, the more others are able to feel what you say. This is because silence magnifies essence. It removes distraction, it reveals intention. And intention is what connects hearts, not cleverness, not volume, not persuasion. In romantic relationships, especially, this principle becomes vital. Often, people mistake love for emotional accessibility at all times, but love without boundaries dissolves into emotional chaos. When a woman holds space in silence, especially when provoked or misunderstood, she creates a container for real connection. She doesn't react to every mood swing, every criticism, every slight. Her silence becomes a mirror in which the other person can see themselves more clearly. And when a man is met with such depth, such unwavering calm, it awakens something ancient in him. Respect, reverence, a desire to rise to the level of her presence. In one particular story, a woman named Amira had been in a relationship with a man who constantly pushed her emotional boundaries, testing her with inconsistency, withholding affection, and then over-explaining his way back into her life. Each time she engaged, she texted back, she explained her feelings, she forgave too quickly, and each time she felt smaller, less respected, more emotionally unstable. Until one day she stopped explaining, she stopped sending long messages. She didn't disappear, but she no longer filled the silence. She gave space instead of seeking closeness. And something remarkable happened. The man, for the first time, began to experience the weight of his actions. Not because she demanded an apology, but because the absence of her reaction was louder than any words she had ever spoken. Her silence had become sacred. It told the truth she never needed to say aloud. This kind of silence is not cold. It is clarity wrapped in restraint, and it is deeply felt by those who have ears to hear. Not just physical ears, but emotional ears. When you remove your voice from places where it's not honored, your silence becomes a lesson that cannot be ignored. But this requires internal alignment. A woman must know her worth, not intellectually, but somatically. She must feel her value in her bones. Only then does her silence carry the kind of weight that commands attention. If her silence is rooted in fear or avoidance, it will echo with uncertainty. But if her silence is born from self-awareness, it will speak louder than any argument. This leads us into the deeper reality of energy. Because even silence is not empty. Silence carries vibration. Silence carries presence. And a woman's energy, when it is no longer entangled in the chaos of others, becomes magnetic. It draws people in. Not because she is trying to be attractive, but because she is aligned. Her peace becomes rare in a world of emotional noise. This is why silent women lead with energy, not with noise. They are not trying to be understood. They are already understanding. They are not chasing validation. They have already validated themselves. And so their energy speaks before their mouths ever open. Eastern philosophy teaches that our chi, our life force, is scattered every time we speak unnecessarily, every time we engage in conflict, every time we defend ourselves against those unwilling to understand us. But when we conserve that energy, when we move with intention, we preserve our power. That preserved energy becomes presence, and that presence speaks. Imagine walking into a room where someone is calm, silent, yet fully alert. You feel them before they speak. You sense their groundedness. You instinctively respect their space. That's not charisma. That's coherence. Their inner and outer world are aligned, and you feel safe in their energy because they are safe within themselves. Consider Nadia, a woman in her 40s who worked in a high-pressure corporate environment. She used to speak often in meetings, trying to prove her intelligence, trying to be seen. But her ideas were often overlooked. One day, after a particularly difficult week, she attended a leadership retreat where she learned a different approach to center herself before speaking, to engage from inner alignment, and to allow silence to do the initial talking. She began practicing this at work, She said less, but her eyes were more attentive, her body more still, her energy more contained. Soon, her input began to carry more influence. Not because her ideas had changed, but because her energy had. She was no longer chasing approval. She had become the embodiment of confidence, and that was felt. People don't just hear your words, they feel your presence. They read your posture, your breath, your facial stillness, your emotional stability. When you are centered, your silence becomes an invitation, not a withdrawal. It becomes a force field, not a defense mechanism. And in relationships, this energetic leadership is transformative. A silent woman who has done her inner work no longer begs to be heard. She listens to herself first. She doesn't argue for her value. She walks in it. She doesn't explain her standards. She embodies them. And because of this, the people around her begin to shift. Some leave because they cannot meet her vibration. Others rise because they've never seen such depth modeled before. There is nothing passive about this kind of silence. It is active. It is vibrant. It is alive with discernment. It chooses when to speak, when to act, and when to rest. It recognizes that not every situation requires a response, that not every conflict needs a conclusion, that sometimes the most powerful transformation happens in stillness. This doesn't mean you withhold your truth. It means you share it wisely. You speak from overflow, not desperation. You wait until your emotions have settled, and then you speak from your center, not your storm. In the realm of emotional connection, this presence becomes healing. Partners who have spent their lives in chaos often find themselves magnetically drawn to a silent woman, not because she saves them, but because she doesn't join their drama.